Good afternoon, brothers. If you will take your seats, we'll begin our program. On behalf of the Panama congregation, we welcome you here this afternoon to a special program that's going to be presented to you by Brother Nathan Fuel from Patterson, New York, Patterson Bethel, and we're really looking forward to this, and we hope that everyone here is all set for this so that they can be encouraged and upheld by this special program. To begin with, let's sing a song together, and we're going to sing Song 44, Jehovah Really Cares, from 1 Peter 5:7. Now, let's give our attention to Brother Fuel. He's going to discuss the subject, depression, a part of this life. Brother Fuel, please.
Well, first off, my wife Diane, we would like to thank you very much for inviting us to your congregation this weekend. We appreciate the privilege, and we look forward to getting to know some of you friends better. We'd also like to bring you the love and greetings of the 1,000 brothers and sisters serving at Patterson Bethel. Now, to start with, I'd like to tell you a little bit about us. I've been in Bethel since May of 1982, my wife since January of 1993. I was raised mostly here in California. Started out first, I was born in South Carolina, though. We lived a little bit in France for about 4 years. Then I was raised over in Paso Robles, California, most of my life. Then our family went to where the need was great in northeast Texas around 1981. Diane was born and raised in Maine. She pioneered there in the mountains of Maine. She had the privilege also working with some missionaries over in Saipan. We both like to snow ski, ride horses, play volleyball and soccer, hike. We're active outdoors type people. But that's enough about us. Those are some good things that we enjoy. But unfortunately, many, if not all of us from time to time, have to cope with depression. Depression. Not a subject a lot of people like to talk about. Probably even fewer will admit that they get it. But it's one of the hard cores of reality in this world. What we're going to do is discuss various types of people, various groups, what may cause their depression, as well as some things that can help pull us through our low times. Notice I didn't say eliminate our depression, because that's impossible to do while we're living in this wicked system of things. Now, the first step in dealing with depression is to admit that we get depressed. There's nothing wrong with that. We all get depressed, and oftentimes rightfully so, because this world is demanding. It's merciless on us. The pandemic of depression isn't something that's indigenous to the 21st century. In the Bible, there were many examples of people who were depressed for various reasons. Now, one that comes to mind was Hannah, the wife of Elkanah. If you please open your Bibles to 1 Samuel, the first chapter, we'll consider a few verses there about her. That's 1 Samuel, the first chapter. We're going to start in verse number 2. Here it says, "And he," that being Elkanah, "had 2 wives, the name of the one being Hannah, and the name of the other being Peninnah. And Peninnah came to have children, but Hannah had no children." Now moving down to verse 6, here it says, "And her rival wife, or Peninnah, also vexed her," or Hannah, "sorely for the sake of making her feel disconcerted, because Jehovah had closed up her womb." We look at the latter part of verse 7. It says, "That was the way that she would vex her, so that she would weep and not eat." And there we have 2 classic signs of depression: excessive crying and a loss of appetite. We notice over in verse 15 that Hannah calls herself a woman hard-pressed in spirit. And in verse 16, she says that she has vexation. Well, she had cause to feel depressed because the members of her own household, they ridiculed her. She had to deal with the disgrace of being a barren Israelite woman. Now, in ancient Israel, she would have been viewed as a failure as a wife because she didn't have children. Another prime example of ones who had reason to be depressed were the Thessalonians. Now, the Greek Macedonian city of Thessalonica was a thriving seaport and evidently a nice place to live, but not for true Christians. Now, although a congregation was established there, practically from its inception it experienced continuous persecution. In fact, all evidence points to the fact that a lot of the brothers in that congregation had been killed by their persecutors. Now, how would we feel if a lot of the friends here in the Bakersfield area had been killed, and there was a good chance that more of us would be next? Well, let's look at 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 14, because it gives us the understandable mental state of a lot of these friends. 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 14. Here it says, "On the other hand, we exhort you, brothers, admonish the disorderly," here's the key, "speak consolingly to the depressed souls, support the weak, be long-suffering toward all." So as we can see, depression has been with mankind for quite some time. Well, now let's talk about depression in our time. What we're going to do is discuss various groups of people, what causes their depression. First, we're going to consider non-witnesses. Then, in a general aspect, true Christians. Then we're going to get more specific and go through different classes of people, like our youths, single folks, single parents, married ones, by extension, ones that are married to unbelievers, older friends, our pioneers. And then finally, with a group that most people have a misconception as far as being depressed, our ministerial servants and our elders. Over the past few years, there have been countless medical articles on depression that show that it's really a problem to be reckoned with. The U.S. News and World Report said that World Health Organization, it predicts that by the year 2020, depression will be second only to heart disease as the leading cause of disability worldwide. The Boston Globe quoted a research study that says that depression seems to be the price to pay for civilization. Now, the reason for that is that people living in countries like the United States, the westernized lands, although they have more possessions and toys, their family lives are often fragmented or they're not close. See, materialism can never take the place of love. Now, on top of this, people have to contend with paying off bills, credit cards, and in many cases, even finding a decent job. More and more people are experiencing health problems, or they know they can't afford good health care. Now, to deal with these depressing problems, people from all levels of society, what they will do is they will immerse themselves in their jobs, and then on the weekends, they indulge in some form of recreation or just outright party. They adopt a me-first attitude, self-gratification, no barriers, no conscience as to their actions. Now, as true Christians, we know that we can't have that kind of an attitude. We have limits to our actions. We must have Bible-trained consciences. Now, besides having the aforementioned anxieties upon us like ill health and paying off bills, we as Jehovah's Witnesses have other causes of depression and other obligations that could cause us depression because we have a Bible-trained conscience. Let me sound like a bit of an oxymoron, but consider this. There's no denying that being part of Jehovah's organization is the best thing that could have happened to any one of us here this afternoon. The love and unity in it is unsurpassed, and that should help to dispel depression in us to some degree. However, besides having the anxieties of life, we're also expected to study for 4 congregational meetings a week, attend 5 meetings weekly. We should be able to participate as we can in the meetings as well. Have weekly family studies. Have our own personal study. Prepare a part on the meeting occasionally, maybe in the school or the service meeting. Go out in the field ministry on a regular basis. The national average hovers around 9-10 hours a month, but in life we're always encouraged to do better than average, right? We're also asked to read 4 new magazines each month. We have our new releases every summer from the convention, our yearbooks. Now, if we're faithful and consistent in doing these things, it is a joy, but at the same time, it's draining. It's nonstop, week after week, month after month, year after year. Now, it's not a rule of thumb, but people can get depressed when they get worn down. Now, think about non-witnesses. They don't have all those things in their schedules. Most of them don't even go to church. And if they do, it's for a little bit of time on a Sunday. Try to get them to spend one of their free nights after work or school preparing for or studying for a religious service. It's more like give me a bag of chips and the remote control. I can watch HBO or ESPN too. See, that's why preachers pass around collection plates. They pay these men to do this kind of thing for them. Imagine asking non-witnesses to at least once a week spend some of their own time and resources knocking on their neighbors' doors, telling them about God's kingdom. It's not going to happen. So they have more time to relax, take naps, go out on the town on the weekends, watch TV, etc. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that we at times, in the truth, get depressed. We've got a lot on us. Okay, fine. Some of the eyes may be thinking, I got down the things he's mentioned in there. I can handle that. Meetings, studying, service, no problem. Good, a lot of friends can. What we're going to do now, then, is discuss acutely some things that can get us depressed. Let's start out with our youths. Now, when you're young, it should be one of, if not the happiest time in our life. Life should be exciting for us. We're acquiring knowledge about new things. We have various interests that we're pursuing. We should be more carefree. We're not so loaded down with life's anxieties and problems. But unfortunately, that must be not the way that it really is today, because a lot of young people In fact, thousands of them every year, they commit suicide or they get into some type of serious trouble. Now, thankfully, teen suicide is not a huge problem in our organization. But discouragement, depression, in a sense, is probably more of a problem than we may realize. Well, how so? Well, we know it's human nature to want to be accepted by other people, to fit in, especially do our youth have this desire. Well, we can run into a problem here, though. See, most of the youth in the organization, they are God-fearing, and they want to uphold Jehovah's standards. Not only that, they like to have their parents smile of approval for being fine young Christians. However, seeing that we're all imperfect, our youth have other influences that vie for their loyalty. Peer pressure from schoolmates can be virtually unbearable today. They have the pressure to date, drink, do drugs, have sex, play sports, hang out, go to college. You get the picture. Always saying no to these things gets old. Doubly so if your peers ridicule our Christian stand and insult you. That's not a good feeling. That's depressing. And something else that may magnify those bad feelings is that some youths may want to do some of these aforementioned things, but know that they can't. They may feel trapped, hemmed in by Jehovah's righteous standards. Something else that could depress a youth is being conscious of his or her own sins or sinful desires. Let's say, for example, that they have a secret fault like masturbation. Well, they may feel devastated each time they succumb to that bad habit. Let's consider now the single people in the congregation. Now, singleness has a lot of advantages. The chief one being that a person they have a greater freedom in their schedule to worship Jehovah God without distraction, to do so whole soul. See, that's it. A lot of people would rather be distracted when they serve Jehovah. They want to be married. Well, a primary cause of this is that the world tries to make you feel incomplete if you're not with someone. Now, unfortunately, our friends can put a lot of peer pressure on us to get married. When are you going to settle down and get married? What's wrong with you anyways? You know, if you wait too long, like when you get into your 30s, you're going to get into the weird zone or something. Yeah, it sounds funny. Oh, she's got to be another old maid around here. But really, that is worldly thinking. It's not divine thinking. Comments like that can eat away at a person till they feel empty and hurt inside. They get so preoccupied with this idea of marriage that everything else in their life begins to suffer. They get so depressed and desperate that they'll marry anyone in the world. In the world. Now that's a depressing thought, isn't it? Marrying out of the truth. Now, single people oftentimes, they think they have it bad. But now let's consider a group that makes their problems pale in significance. Single parents. These friends really have a load to carry in this world. They have to be a mother and father to their child or children. Now, I phrase that mother and father because most of the time it's the mothers who are left shouldering this responsibility, but sometimes the shoe's on the other foot. They have to provide for their families spiritually, materially, and emotionally, and this can be both mentally and physically draining. They have the anxieties of making ends meet. With a solitary income, that can be virtually impossible today. Now, to top it all off, they may be dealing with feelings of guilt because they're in their present state because of some big mistakes, bad decisions that they have made in the past. If only they were married, things would be better. Maybe. That brings us to our next group, married people. Now, marriage is a blessing from Jehovah, something that should bring us true happiness, to be with the love of our life forever. But ooh, that's the key. Forever. It's a long time to be with the same person. What if we didn't get exactly what we wanted for a marriage mate? What after a few months or years we think, I made a big mistake here. Well, see, our single folks or single parents may think that they have it rough. But our married folks may be thinking, this institution isn't all that it's cracked up to be. I mean, no one told me that my new husband or wife had this many imperfections. Well, a person in this situation, or one that feels that they're in this predicament, they may feel trapped, that there's no way out of this self-imposed torment. What can they do? They get depressed. Now, by extension, someone that's probably even worse off in the marriage arrangement is a person that doesn't mind being married, even loves their mate, but they're married to an unbeliever. So right off, they have a limited joy in their marital union because Jehovah God can't fully be a part of it. They can't share all of the wonderful experiences they have in the ministry or hear about with their mate because they don't want to be preached to. They stand before Jehovah God as husband and wife, but can't worship him as such. Now, most of these friends love their mates dearly, and something else that really terrifies them, as they know the truth, is the prospect of losing this mate at the end of this system of things. See, he or she has no desire, no interest in serving Jehovah God. And we all know how Jehovah feels about that. How depressing for them. Now, another angle that we could consider here is if we have a sister who is married to a brother, but he doesn't take the lead spiritually for their family. Let's say that he's been in the organization serving Jehovah for years, but he doesn't have a family study. He doesn't reach out to be used by Jehovah in the organization. Well, over the years, she may get very discouraged about this and frustrated. In time, it could cause her to be depressed over the situation. Now, taking this matter to the extreme is if we have in a family one mate that commits a gross sin against Jehovah God, and they have to be discipled from the Christian congregation. Well, this is going to be a real test on the faithful mate to Jehovah. It could really prove to be depressing for them. Now we go into a group that are especially close to our hearts, the older ones, the elderly friends in the Christian congregation. Now, it's a joy to sit and visit with these friends here, hear about their experiences over the years, tap on their wisdom in life. But unfortunately, all of that practical knowledge comes with a price to be paid in this world, and the cost that they usually pay is old age. As they get older, their health starts to break down. They can no longer do as much as they once did in their service to Jehovah God. They start to feel that they're useless. They're no longer used by Jehovah and his organization in a full sense, that they're now a burden on their family or other friends in the congregation, that they're forgotten members of the congregation. No longer they're not as visible, they're not as active. So they start to get down on themselves. They start getting depressed. And as the years go by, a lot of times their own thoughts start to depress them. They worry about what their quality of life is going to be as they slow down. Will they have to be in a wheelchair, assisted living, things of that nature? Now, tragically, a lot of them lose their mates in death. I dare say there's nothing as depressing as a person losing their closest lifelong companion outside of Jehovah. And then one at a time, as the years go by, also losing their peers, their friends, their best friends. After a while, they feel virtually alone. It's a very sad situation for them. We'll consider our next group. And this group, actually, their role is encouraging us in the Christian congregations. That's our regular pioneers. Now, while they're going about fully accomplishing their ministry in the service, they may have to deal with some things that could depress them that we may not realize. Seeing that they spend a large amount of their time in sacred service, this allows them a lot less time in their schedules to enjoy the everyday luxuries of life. You know, in many parts of the world, because of the economic situation, it's hard enough for them to attain and maintain the necessities, let alone get out there and enjoy luxuries. They're not sure sometimes how they're going to pay the monthly rent or that unexpected bill that has to be taken care of that month. Well, if these types of things continue month in, month out, year in, year out, they can get anxious and depressed about the situation. They may even consider quitting their pioneer service. Another factor that could depress them is apathy in the territory that they are assigned to work. Now, there are a few joys that compare with pioneers that have a lot of productive Bible studies. You can see the life in their eyes. They're so happy. But it's diametrically opposite for them if there's no interest in the field. Not only is it physically tiring, continually knocking on doors with no results, but mentally it can take an unbelievable toll on a person. After a while, they don't want to even try anymore. I liken it to playing baseball. Most of us have done that a little bit. Let's say that we go out and take some batting practice and someone throws us 20 pitches. 20 pitches, let's say you connect on 15 or so. Well, this is pretty good. You're feeling not bad about this. You take a few more cuts, right? But now let's say out of 20 pitches, you only hit the ball once or twice. Not only will you be tired of just swinging through the air, more than likely you'll just, in disgust, throw the bat. You're getting tired of that. Well, that's how it can be with a pioneer in an apathetic territory. Now, an apathetic attitude of the ministry within the Christian congregation can also depress a pioneer. It can zap their joy of service. If the publishers or the elders are not supportive of the pioneers, then in time they become discouraged and depressed. They feel that their self-sacrificing efforts are not appreciated by their congregation. Now, at times, circumstances do require that a pioneer stop their sacred service, and that is unfortunate. Many a pioneer, when that happens, they've hit an all-time spiritual low because now they feel that they failed in their pioneering commission. They've let Jehovah down, themselves, and their local congregation. Well, now we're going to our last group to be discussed, and that's our appointed servants. First, we'll consider the ministerial servants. Initially, what we want to point out here is that we really appreciate the hard work that these brothers do in the congregation in our behalf. We could call them the unsung heroes because they do a lot of the necessary work behind the scenes. Things like your Kingdom Hall maintenance, territory filing, accounts. These daily, weekly tasks, they run so smooth most of the time that people hardly ever notice. And if a brother's had such a responsibility for a long period of time and no one ever expresses words of appreciation, he can get a little down about that. He may feel that he's being used, laid to the side, and forgotten. Now, what probably depresses ministerial servants even more, though, is that they've been a servant now for many years, and they've been working hard in the congregation, reaching off for the office of an older man, desiring to be an elder themselves. But time and again, they're passed over regarding this privilege of responsibility. Now, more than likely, they're going to go through an array of emotions when this happens, but it usually all culminates in their being depressed. Well, lastly, now we're going to look at our elders. Here's someone that we would think has it all. They've reached a high level of spiritual growth and maturity. He's a good example of a Christian. But as we've said, no one is immune to depression in this system. Well, what are some things that can get an elder depressed? Well, for starters, knowing that this office and privilege of oversight has been undeservedly given to him by Jehovah and his organization. So if he falls short in some way in something that he has said or done, it really hits home because of the harm he may have caused others within the congregation. See, people expect a lot of him, and scripturally so. So the last thing that he wants to do is fall severely short of their expectations. Another factor could be that the congregation he's associated with is dealing with severe spiritual problems. Like, for example, if some of the youths are getting into trouble, or if some of the families are having marital difficulties, the couples. Now, although these may not be his problems directly, personally, it does affect him because he loves the congregation. And it's a painful thing, it's depressing when some of the friends are going through these issues or if they leave the congregation. One last factor we'll mention could be the workload that an elder is required to bear in the congregation for various reasons. Weekly duties like preparing to conduct a book study, watchtower study, theocratic school, keeping congregational records, having a family study, personal study, service meeting part, an ongoing shepherding program. Now you get the picture. There's joy in doing these things, but then again, it is a non-stop schedule. It's relentless. Every week, every month, every year. After a while, it could appear that there's no light at the end of the tunnel. You know, this could wear a brother down after a while. It could get him depressed. I look at it this way. It's a lot of fun eating hot, homemade apple pie a la mode, right? Tastes so good. But after a second and a third big piece, well, enough already. What are you trying to do to me, right? That's how the brother can feel. Okay, so we've just about covered the gamut of people, why we may get depressed. What are we going to do about it? Being imperfect, we don't have all the answers and solutions, but there are some steps that we can take to help pull us through our tougher times. Let's start over again. We're going to go through our categories of people systematically and see what we come up with. Now, we're going to start talking to the youths again at this point. Now, the pressures that you're going through, most of us can't even imagine. So I'm not going to stand up here and tell you, I know exactly what you're going through, because I don't. But we were all young once, believe it or not. And while we have a different level of problems to deal with that you folks may have today, the solution to these problems is the same, even though we're in the 21st century now. See, Jehovah has lovingly supplied a lot for you. You have your family, the local elders, the entire congregation, even a worldwide organization that has brothers assigned to write excellent articles on your behalf. But see, none of this is going to do you any good unless you take the time to read it and apply it in your life. No one else's efforts are going to save you from this corrupt world. Only your own, coupled with your faith, reliance, and trust in Jehovah God. See, we have some fine articles out there. We have publications like the Young People Ask book. We have magazine articles with that same theme. We have these nice videos for the youth. But in order for that information to do you or any of us any good, you have to take time to do one thing with it. Meditate on it. You have to look at that material, ask yourself some questions. how's this going to make me a better Christian, a better person? Do I want to be a better person? Why? Why not? What does this information tell me about Jehovah God and his love for me? See, it's our relationship with Jehovah God that pulls us through our tougher times, the pressures of this system. I know too many young people that I grew up with out here in California that had all the proper Christian training. Their parents were serving as elders, ministerial servants, regular pioneers. They were really active. These kids read everything. If you ask them a spiritual question, they can give you the answer. They knew the answers. But somewhere along the line, the information was just getting stuck in the head and didn't get down into the heart. But now they're out there in the world, in prison, illegitimate children, drug addicts. Their lives are a mess. But it doesn't have to be like that. Meditation on what we are learning here. Let's talk to our single friends now. No doubt most of you are familiar with the Apostle Paul's counsel at 1 Corinthians, the 7th chapter, to stay single if at all possible. But you determined that for you, marriage is a better option. Okay, fine. Please turn your Bibles to 1 John 5, verse 14. We'll see how this ties into our discussion. 1 John 5, verse 14. Here it points out, and this is the confidence that we have toward him, and no matter what it is that we ask according to his will, he hears us. So do we get the point here? If we're praying to Jehovah God for a mate, and we feel in our heart it's out of the proper motive, it's going to make us a better servant of Jehovah, then we'll have confidence in Jehovah God to let the matter rest with him to the end of finding a suitable Christian marriage mate. If it's God's will that we get married, fine. If it's his will that we stay single, fine. See, in essence, when we dedicated our lives to Jehovah and we symbolize that by water baptism, what we were saying was that Jehovah God, you have the authority to direct my life course. Your will takes precedence. If we're staying single in this system for a period of time, or maybe through the end of this system, then more than likely there's a good reason for it. Jehovah could be answering our prayers by saying, stay single. Be more focused on doing my will, the kingdom preaching work. Instead of worrying about finding a mate and getting depressed about it, we could use the extra time and energy that we have as single people in helping friends in the Christian congregation and applying ourselves more to the kingdom ministry. Now, something along a practical line to help a single person is that they could use the time in their schedules to become a better qualified marriage mate. See, there are thousands of young people out there, single people, that would love to get married. But quite frankly, they're not doing much to help themselves out. See, single sisters could concentrate on having some good homemaking skills, knowing how to cook more than just one or two dishes, knowing how to keep a home really clean and presentable. See, the brothers they may consider to be the catch of the circuit could probably marry a lot of sisters. But what he's looking for is that special sister that has a little bit more to offer him. Not just someone that's fun to go out to dinner with. He could spend his money some other way. Now, I hear the people laughing. Let's talk about the young guys here. Single brothers, what they could do, they could concentrate on being real spiritual men. Not a fuddy-dud. You have some life and personality to you. You're a fun person. But you have a spiritual side to you. You have depth. See, that sister you've seen at the circuit assemblies giving her experiences on the program, she may treat you nice. But if she's half the gem that you think she is, she wants someone that she's not on the same spiritual plane with. She wants a spiritual head, not a spiritual peer. She has to respect you as well as love you. So that means the majority of young single brothers could stand to do a bit more Bible reading, personal study, and research to attain the real depth, the qualities to become a good spiritual head of the family. So you may be able to court that beautiful sister because you dress sharp, you drive a nice car, but that's not what's going to make your marriage long and lasting and strong. Putting Jehovah God first in your courtship and your marriage, building on him as the foundation, is what's really going to count. Let's consider the single parents now. Now, admittedly, this is one of the toughest situations that anyone has to deal with in this system of things. Jehovah God has always recognized this as well, and is showing extra consideration to ones in this circumstance is evident throughout the scripture. Now, oftentimes a single parent feels alone in raising their child. A scripture that can help deal with the situation is in Psalm. Please open to Psalm 68, verse 5. We'll read that. Psalm 68, verse 5. Here it points out, a father of fatherless boys and a judge of widows is God in his holy dwelling. So Jehovah is a father to your children, and in principle this would also apply to dads who are single parents, and that Jehovah gives us guidelines on how to best raise our children in this wicked world. Now, single parents' time and energy, it's limited because of everything that's upon them. So that behooves them to especially make Jehovah God real to their children and explain his principles, his guidelines for them in their formative years. Now, some of the pressures that are common to this arrangement here of being a single parent, they can't be eliminated in this world. But it is nice to see some of the friends in the local congregation taking interest and they help these parents out. But one thing that definitely lightens the load of a single parent is if they have children that are properly trained and they cooperate with the parent in serving Jehovah God. Now, as to the matter of a single parent being depressed over some big mistake or bad decision they made in the past, frankly, there really isn't much that's going to change that now. So the best thing to do is go on with life the best that we can and to rely on Jehovah. Now, to touch on an account here in 2 Samuel, the 12th chapter in principle. Our setting is that of King David. He's committed adultery with Bathsheba. They get discovered. She's pregnant. Jehovah tells David that this child is going to die. Now, when the child's born, it doesn't die right away. It lives for almost a week. During that course of that period of time, David is trying to change Jehovah God's judgment regarding that child, but it doesn't work. The child dies. Now, after this happens, David could have gone to a deep depression. He just lost a son. But instead, what did he do? He got cleaned up and ate a meal. Was David hard-hearted and unrepentant? No. He just realized that what had happened could not be changed, and Jehovah God allowed for it to end up this way. Does that mean that he didn't have Jehovah's love and favor anymore? Not by any means. The rest of the Bible account shows us that Jehovah God was with David. He helped him out. It's just that David had to pay for a big mistake, a bad decision. But the same thing happens to us today in principle. If we've made some mistakes and we've gone to Jehovah to straighten these matters out and to his organization to clear things up with the brothers, then we can have confidence that Jehovah God has also forgiven us and forgotten about it. If he can do that, then so can we. So there really isn't any reason for us to depress ourselves over the past and to hang on to that, but to instead live in the present and for the future. Now, that analogy of David that we just made could also apply in ways to our next group of people that we're going to discuss, and that's our married folks. Now, we mentioned earlier how some married Christians may think or they may have married the wrong person. But at this point in time, what they have to keep in mind is that they are in a covenant relationship before Jehovah God with this person and before witnesses, and they are obligated to fulfill it. Now, needless to say, it's a lot easier to do when there's joy in the arrangement and not depression. Still, the best thing that they can do is live life the best that they can now, rely on Jehovah God, live in the present and for the future. Still, the best thing that they can do is live life the best that they can now, rely on Jehovah God, live in the present and for the future. Okay, fine. It's easy for those words just to roll off my tongue. But how do we go about helping a troubled or bad marriage? Well, we have to get back to the basics. Turn your Bibles, please, to Ecclesiastes 4, verse 12. This will help us out. Ecclesiastes 4, verse 12. Here it points out, and if somebody could overpower one alone, two together could make a stand against him. And a threefold cord cannot quickly be torn in two. Now, a threefold cord, that's the key here. In our society today, a lot of us aren't too familiar with threefold cords, but let me illustrate it for you a little bit. In my previous job at Bethel, it was in the press room, we have brothers that we call bundlers when they first come to the department, and it's their job to tie up the printing material that comes off of the presses in what we call bundles. Now, bundles are magazines or signatures that are under a lot of pressure. They're compressed. There's like 250 to 400 of them in what we call a bundle, and they weigh about 70 pounds each. Now, what we tell the brothers to do, they have to tie them up with rope, is they grab a rope that has a section like this, any place in it, that has one cord. They know there's no way this rope's going to hold up to the pressure of that bundle. So what we'll do is say, just throw it away. We'll fix it or throw it away. It's not good. If they've got a rope like this here in it, a rope that has a section like this in it, let me separate these. 2 cords. Yeah, here we go. Well, it may do the job. You know, it's got some pretty good strength. But the problem is when you decompress it on the stacker part of that's coming off of the press, a lot of times the pressure of that bundle finds the weaker part of the rope and it pops. And now you're behind the machine trying to get another rope to tie it up. Or let's say you even get it off the stacker and get it on the pallet. Oftentimes what happens there, again, the load characteristics on the bundle shift, and now the rope breaks. And you have magazines that are getting soiled that we have to throw away. It's more waste. So again, we encourage them not to use those kind of ropes. The only ropes we encourage them to use are ones like this here, the three-folded ones, the braided ones, because they have the necessary strength to hold a bundle intact for months, even years on end. Every year when we print the bound volumes, we have the January, February, March issues. We have to put those in storage as we're printing the distributor copies, and then we can't make the bound volume books until later in the year when we print the December issues and then put them together. Well, that's just how it is in marriage. One person can't make it work on their own. Two people are hard-pressed to make it work because of their imperfections. In the world today, many marriages have problems because husbands and wives put God in their marriage. Even in the truth, the marriages that exclude Jehovah have some serious problems. Only three-folded marriages in which Jehovah is the integral part can withstand the pressures of this system of things. So how can we have this threefold cord? The basics. And in fact, these next few points would help all of us from getting depressed. Number one, prayer. Regular family prayers at meal times and praying together as a couple at the end of the day a few times a week. It helps to keep the couple closer together. Helps them to appreciate that Jehovah God is observing their marriage and he's very much a part of it. Two, family study. Now, this is an aspect that oftentimes is lacking in Christian families today, family study, and it can cost them their marriages and their children to this world. This is where good self-discipline has to come to the fore, and especially on the part of the husband, the father. He sets the tone for the family spiritually. It must be done weekly. And if a married couple are having some problems, then it really should be tailored to address that issue so their marriage can continue on with Jehovah God's blessing. Number three, meeting attendance and preparing for the meetings. Now, if either of these things are lacking in the marriage, then we won't have the joy that comes from associating with the brothers and sisters here at the meetings and taking in knowledge of Jehovah God. And that's not a surprise that people get depressed if they're lacking this association and personal study and family study, because all they're getting now is information from the world. And that's negative. You watch the news and just look at things around you. That's always depressing. Number four, field ministry. There are very few ways to come to appreciate another person better than to work out in service with them. And that applies to married couples as well. And the reason for that is that they're now sharing in the common goal of proclaiming God's kingdom arrangement. That's good news. It's going to help us feel good. Hard to get depressed when we're doing that. And number five would apply more so to marriage mates. That would be making time for our mates. And here we're talking about some quality time for just the two of them, away from the everyday hassles and worries of life. It's like a chance to keep reacquainted and to court again. Well, considering the aspect here of a married sister whose husband does not take the lead spiritually, this can be a very difficult situation for her, and there's only so much that she can do because she cannot usurp his headship in the family. That's against Jehovah's arrangement. So what can she do? Well, for starters, she can personally apply those 5 points that we just talked on there and do that to the best of her ability. Her prayers to Jehovah God, being specific about her problem, will help lessen the emotional burden that's been placed upon her. See, Jehovah God is looking down here. He sees her plight, and he will give her the strength to endure the matter. Now, if appeals to her husband to have a regular family study are in vain, then she may need to schedule one herself for their children if they have any. She want to keep in mind the faithful women of old like Lois and Eunice, who, although they had no spiritual lead in their family, they raised young Timothy to be an outstanding servant of Jehovah God. And over the years in Bethel, I've had the privilege to work with quite a few young brothers that have come from that type of family arrangement, and their mothers are women that should be highly praised for the good jobs that they have done. Now, if it's just the two of them, then you want to keep in mind Matthew 5, verse 3, where it says, "Happy are those conscious of their spiritual need." By taking in a steady stream of Jehovah God's provisions, it can't help but make her feel less depressed. Now, although she may be limited in what she can enforce in the family arrangement, one thing that no one can limit her in is her worship and service to Jehovah God, not even her husband. Her dedication to Jehovah comes first and foremost. And that goes along with other aspects that we mentioned before as to meeting attendance, preparing for meetings, the field ministry. Most men that aren't doing anything spiritually will usually not try to stop someone else that's trying. If he doesn't want to be used by Jehovah's organization and reach out, there's no reason for her to think that the organization can't use her. She can look for ways to enhance her service to Jehovah God. In time, maybe she can become an auxiliary pioneer, or maybe even a regular pioneer. Now, when one's mate has been disfellowshipped, all the faithful mate can do there is keep on serving Jehovah in the proper way and never give up hope that their mate will again find favor in God's eyes. Jehovah loves the one he disciplines, as Hebrews 12 verse 6 tells us. So in time, if the guilty party takes the necessary steps befitting repentance and they are truly contrite, they will be reinstated to the Christian congregation. Now, if they choose not to repent, then once again we have to remember that no one can be forced to love and serve Jehovah God. It is a choice and decision that they have to make and live with. It's a decision that we may have to live with too. Now, another biblical example that we can look to in principle here involves David, Abigail, and Nabal. You may remember this account. Nabal was Abigail's husband. He was a harsh, unreasoning man, definitely not a spiritual person. The Bible calls him a good-for-nothing man. In fact, his very name means senseless, stupid. But that didn't keep wise Abigail from loyally sticking with this man and doing her best regarding their family situation. Now, as the rest of the account shows us, Nabal's foolish actions almost cost him and his entire household their lives. But wise Abigail interceded, and the disaster was averted. No doubt Jehovah observed this righteous woman. He felt for her because of the domestic conditions she had to live under. But what he really loved about her was that how she loyally adhered to his lofty principles, his standards, despite her difficulties. He blessed her, as we mentioned before, by David sparing her life and that of the household. But God didn't forget about her. Later on, he blessed her further by changing her domestic situation. Remember what happened to Nabal. And then he even furthered it by giving her a mate who loved Jehovah God as much as she did. Now, what do we learn from that? That Jehovah is aware of any like situation today, and he will not forget his faithful servants. He will rectify the matter in his due time and in the proper way. What's required of such ones in this situation today is to rely on Jehovah, wait on him to see how matters develop and work out. And we always want to remember that no trial that we face today, nothing is going to last forever. They all come to an end. Now, of course, if a marriage is having some really deep-set problems, there's always the avenue of consulting with the older men in the local Christian congregation, and they can direct us to various publications on marriage, like the Family Happiness book, and we have selected Watchtower articles on marriage. Now, marital problems can be tough. There's no doubt about that. But with Jehovah's help and earnest effort on the part of both individuals, they can be overcome. And then marriage can be an institution of joy and not one of depression. Now, of course, the aforementioned steps on marriage, they help a lot when both parties are in the truth. But what about those of us who have an unbelieving mate? Now, before we mention how the aspect of a believing mate being depressed because they can't fully share in their worship with their unbelieving mate, that causing that type of a feeling. Additionally, the problem that this spawns is that it can be very discouraging for an individual when they're facing marital problems. They're doing all that they can by the scriptures to work these problems out, and their mate doesn't know what the Bible standards are for marriage, or they could even care less. Well, this is going to call for a lot of endurance and trust in Jehovah God to deal with the matter. Some words of encouragement that we can look to for someone in this situation are in 1 Corinthians, the 7th chapter. We'll look here at verses 12, 13, and 16. 1 Corinthians 7, starting in verse 12. Starting in the second line down, Paul says, "If any brother has an unbelieving wife, and yet she is agreeable to dwelling with him, let him not leave her. Any woman who has an unbelieving husband, and yet he is agreeable to dwelling with her, let her not leave her husband." Down to verse 16. "For wife, how do you know but that you will not save your husband? Or husband, how do you know but that you will not save your wife?" So if a mate is agreeable to living with for the most part, does not severely try to hinder our worship to Jehovah God and serving him, who knows what may happen in the future as to that person's attitude of serving Jehovah God. Time goes by and they see how their Christian mate handles the stresses that come upon their marriage in a fine way, in a Bible way, in a scriptural way, then it may cause them to be interested in looking at the truth themselves to where they will now become a worshiper of God. We've had a lot of cases over the years where that's happened. I know in my family, my mother took the truth first, and when my father saw the changes of her back in the 60s, he left the military and he came into the truth. At any rate, we leave such matters in Jehovah's hands. Well, continuing on with our older friends, the elderly ones in the congregation, it's understandable that these friends can feel down at times, especially if they've been real active in their service in the past to Jehovah. A lot of us can feel down and listless if, let's say, we're not feeling up to par for like a week or a few days. We have to stay in the house. Well, imagine that being how you feel every day. How we want the older friends to realize that they're still very much a part of our lives, that we love them dearly. And more importantly, Jehovah God loves them. He appreciates all that they have done in the past and continue to do presently in their service to him. A scripture that emphasizes this is in the book of Hebrews. Let's look at Hebrews 6, verse 10. Hebrews 6, verse 10. Here it points out, "For God is not unrighteous so as to forget your work and the love you show for his name, and that you have ministered to the holy ones and continue ministering." So with the hectic pace of life these days, even if it seems that some of the younger friends are a bit forgetful, please remember that Jehovah God never forgets any of us, and especially you older friends who have been so faithful to him over the decades. Also, too, Jehovah remembers any of our loved ones that we've lost in death. As Revelation, the 20th and 21st chapters brings out, death and Hades will give up those dead in them, and God will see to it that death will be no more, nor mourning, nor outcry, nor pain. These former things will have passed away, and these former things include depression. Let's talk to our pioneers now. Now, although pioneering is one of the best ways of life, the fact that it does a lot of good in fomenting Jehovah's purposes means that Satan will be sure to bring it under attack in various ways. And depression could be one thing that he would use. Now, initially, we mentioned finances being a problem, and it can be at certain times. But let's look at David's words in Psalms. Psalms 37, verse 25. Always wanting to remember this here. Psalms 37, verse 25. Here he points out, "A young man I used to be, I have also grown old, and yet I have not seen anyone righteous left entirely, nor his offspring looking for bread." So we see that God never leaves us entirely, and that our needs will be taken care of. Now, our needs, not necessarily our wants. See, if we go to Jehovah God in prayer, and we put our full trust in him so that we have the ability to take care of ourselves, he won't let us down, because we're trying to do his will. Now, that may mean some extra effort on our part, some hard work as pioneers, but not a problem, because as pioneers, we've learned over the years that Jehovah God always blesses hard work. Now, if a pioneer is working in an apathetic territory, there may be only so much they can do about that. Some suggestions could be that we could vary the times of the day that we engage in the witnessing work. Maybe doing some evening witnessing if it's safe in your area to do that. Or we could vary the approaches that we use in the ministry. We could use different introductions to spark interest. We have a list of those that we can refer to in the reasoning book. We could try different facets of the ministry. Some pioneers are now engaging more in street witnessing, business territory, telephone witnessing. We're doing that a lot in our area with a lot of success. So following some of these suggestions can be just what it takes to pick up our spirits a bit and make things interesting for us. Because oftentimes what happens is that people get worn down because they're dealing with the same old every day. Nothing changes. So we can change things up a bit. Now, serving with a congregation that's apathetic towards the ministry can really be a test, and there's no quick fix to this problem. However, it is very rare where we'll have an entire congregation, like 100 people, where no one likes to go out in service. So it can help a pioneer to stay happy in their ministry, is to surround themselves with other joyous servants of Jehovah God. If 2 or 3 happy evangelizers find out who these individuals are and they recruit them in the ministry, and then in time they widen out and then recruit other ones that are a little weaker in the ministry, it's just going to be a matter of time till we have more and more joyous people out in service. And that's what the organization does all the time when it sends people out into the field as missionaries. It's either a married couple or a pair of brothers and sisters that are partners, and the whole idea is that they can encourage one another, keep each other going in the ministry. See, Jehovah our God is a happy God, the Bible says, and his spirit is infectious. Now, unfortunately, at times a pioneer does have to come off the list for various reasons. Now, that's nothing to be ashamed of, if it's for good reason. See, pioneering is a precious privilege. It's something we shouldn't just toss aside casually. Notice we always use the phraseology, had to come off the pioneer list. No dishonor with that. Quit. That kind of gives a little bad taste, kind of like we just gave up. We quit trying. Well, if any of us have been in some avenue of full-time service and we had to give it up, there's no reason to feel overly depressed about that. Now, true, we may miss it. We may hopefully be back in it one day. Things hopefully will work out that way. But if we did all that we possibly could, we put up a fight to keep pioneering, but we couldn't, well, at least we can look back with satisfaction on what we did accomplish and that we did not quit. See, all that Jehovah God exacts from any one of us here this afternoon is exclusive devotion. And a person can give that to him no matter what his status is on a piece of paper. Well, let's consider now our appointed servants. Considering the ministerial servants first. Mainly, we're going to hone in on the aspect of some of them not being appointed an elder and being let down. Basically, we want to remember is that any privilege of service that we have in Jehovah's organization is just that. It's a privilege. We can't earn any responsibility any more than we can earn life into the new system of things. It's all undeserved kindness. So really, we should be grateful for whatever it is that we can do. Also, too, the local elders or the governing body may be doing us a favor by not appointing us too fast to a privilege of responsibility. This ties into the admonition they're given at 1 Timothy 5, verse 22, to never lay their hands hastily on any man. Now, the reason for that is that if privileges come too fast to brothers, it can end up in them being prideful. That's probably one of the worst, if not the worst quality that a brother can have in the Christian congregation, pride. It can do unbelievable harm. So what may be needed here is just a little bit more time and patience, waiting on Jehovah God's due time for this weighty privilege of responsibility to come our way. Then again, we do have ministerial servants who have been such for a long period of time. These are the brothers that could really get depressed over the situation. A chapter in the Bible that could prove to be of help in dealing with this is 1 Corinthians, the 12th chapter. Let's look at that. 1 Corinthians, the 12th chapter. We're going to read verses 4 through 6, and then we'll go down to verses 28 through 30. It says in verse 4, "Now there are varieties of gifts, but there's the same Spirit. And there are varieties of ministries, and yet there is the same Lord. And there are varieties of operations, and yet it is the same God who performs all the operations in all persons." Now down to verse 28. "And God has set the respective ones in the congregation. First apostles, second prophets, third teachers, then powerful works, then gifts of healings, helpful services, ability to direct, different tongues. Not all are apostles, are they? Not all are prophets, are they? Not all are teachers, are they? Not all perform powerful works, do they? Not all have gifts of healings, do they? Not all speak in tongues, do they? Not all are translators, are they?" Could we add here? "Not all are elders, are they?" Look at verse 31. "But keep zealously seeking the greater gifts, and yet I show you a surpassing way." Now, greater gifts, what greater gifts could there be than a brother being appointed an elder? Well, the A reference there behind the word gifts in verse 31 refers us right across the page to 1 Corinthians 14, verse 1. And there it says, "Pursue love, yet keep zealously seeking the spiritual gifts." That's the key. Love and spiritual gifts. See, any brother, anyone can exude and have these qualities in their life and demeanor. If they have that in their life, it doesn't matter if they're an elder or a ministerial servant, because they're going to be dearly loved by Jehovah God. That's really what counts. Also, we want to remember, as verse 28 says, God has set the respective ones in the congregation. But we have to recognize this fact, have faith in it, accept it, and support it. But now we come into our elders. We mentioned 3 different areas that could get us down and get us depressed as elders. I know I've had to deal with all 3 of these myself over the years, and I still do at times. So working this talk up has helped me out personally as well. Now, when it comes to dealing with our own shortcomings and being discouraged because of that, there's some scriptures and Psalms that we can refer to that will help us out. This actually will help everyone in the congregation. Please turn to Psalm 34, verse 18. Psalm 34, verse 18. Now, when you're feeling about as low as a flea's knees, that's good. You're getting pretty low there. It says, "Jehovah is near to those that are broken at heart, and to those who are crushed in spirit, he saves." So when we're just about throwing the towel because we hurt, don't. Remember that Jehovah is still with us. He's going to see us through whatever the situation is. Now let's turn over to Psalm 103. We'll look at verses 13 and 14 here. Psalm 103, 13 and 14. It says, "As a father shows mercy to his sons, Jehovah has shown mercy to those fearing him. For he himself well knows the formation of us, remembering that we are dust." The fact that we feel bad about whatever it is that's taking place shows that we have a loving fear of Jehovah God. And for that, he will be loving and merciful toward us. Knowing that we still have his favor upon us should help to alleviate a lot of the depression that we're feeling. Now, our second point is where there are a lot of congregational problems that we're dealing with that could wear us down and depress us. All we can do in this situation is what's outlined for us in the book of Galatians. Please turn to Galatians, the 6th chapter. We'll look at verses 1 and 2 here. Galatians 6, verses 1 and 2. Here it points out, "Brothers, even though a man takes some false step before he's aware of it, you who have spiritual qualifications, try to readjust such a man in a spirit of mildness, as you keep an eye on yourself, for fear you may also be tempted. Go on carrying the burdens of one another, and thus fulfill the law of the Christ." So the best thing that we can do is warn these friends from spiritual dangers and give them sound biblical counsel. And as verse 2 points out, we have the obligation to help them with their burdens. But that is where it stops. Please notice in verse 5, "For each one will carry his own load." Each one has to carry their own load. We can't make people stay faithful to Jehovah God any more than we can grant them life into the new system of things. So although we may feel bad if some have left the truth, we can't allow ourselves to be too upset about those individuals for too long, because we have other ones in the congregation that are staying faithful, that need our help and our direction. So we have to give them our priority now in life. They're the ones that need our help. Now, our third point concerns the ongoing workload that elders have as part of their responsibilities. Now, in some cases in the country, because of the amount of brothers that are being used in the congregation or in parts of the world, there's only so much you can do, because you can spread the work around with only what's available. But most of the time, what elders can do is what Moses was instructed to do in the book of Numbers. Let's look at Numbers, the 11th chapter, and see the account here. Now, our setting here is that Moses is distraught. He has an incredible workload upon him. His feelings are voiced for us in verses 14 and 15. This is Moses speaking to Jehovah. "I am not able, I by myself, to carry all this people, because they are too heavy for me. So this is the way that you're going to do to me. Please kill me off altogether if I found favor in your eyes, and let me not look upon my calamity." Think he was depressed? He had some problems there. Well, we see Jehovah's solution to this in verses 16 and 17. Jehovah tells Moses, "Gather for me 70 men out of the older men of Israel, whom we do know that they are older men of the people and officers of theirs, and you must take them to the tent of meeting, and they must station themselves there with you. And I shall have to come down and speak with you there, and I shall have to take away some of the spirit that is upon you and place it upon them. And they will have to help you in carrying the load of the people, that you may not carry it, just you alone." We see that happening over in verses 24 and 25. Moses took care of the really heavy cases, the difficult matters, and the other men handled the other workload. Now, we elders can take similar action today. Some duties that we have to take care of because they've been specifically assigned to us in conjunction with particular positions in the Christian congregation. But other things we could probably delegate to some of the ministerial servants or other baptized brothers that are qualified with the approval of the body of elders. Now, the advantages to this arrangement are evident in, number one, better quality work being done on each assignment, because now a certain brother can really concentrate on that. That's his job to do. He can do it just right. Number two, less stress on certain brothers, because now the elders and other brothers are not being overworked. And number three, the elders being freer to devote more of their time to shepherding the friends in the Christian congregation and working out in service with them. And as elders, that's where we really want to spend our time, with the friends. And to that end, we'd just like to add here, for any brothers that really need to consider how they're going to reach out in these last days to help out the elders in the congregation. We've noticed at the branch for the last few years that there's been a trend for brothers that could do more, not reaching out. We know there's definitely a work involved here, but we want to keep in mind that of all of us that are elders, or I should say brothers in the congregation that are baptized especially, if we all pitch in to help, then everyone doesn't really have that much work to do. It actually spreads out pretty well. So that's something just to keep in mind for the future, if you're not already helping the elders to do that kind of thing for them. So this afternoon we've had a pretty good discussion on this topic, but we could go on and on talking about depression. Some closing points to remember is that if we find ourselves getting depressed, we don't want to start to question whether we really had a true love and trust in Jehovah God, or feel that maybe God has left us. See, unfortunately, a lot of depressed people feel that way. But that's so dangerous, because Jehovah God is our lifeline. Only He's going to pull us out of the depths of depression. It's imperative that we go to Him in prayer more than ever and to seek His strength. And we can't isolate ourselves. He's given us the Christian congregation. We have to definitely get more involved with the congregation at that time. Keep in mind, too, that the elders are always there to help us in any way they can with sound scriptural counsel. Keep close to your heart scriptures and principles, such as 2 Corinthians 4, verse 9. Let's look at that. 2 Corinthians 4, verse 9. Here it says, "We are persecuted, but not left in the lurch. We are thrown down, but not destroyed." Also, 1 Corinthians 10, verse 13. Let's look at that. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 13. Here it says, "No temptation has taken you except what is common to men," depression. "But God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But along with the temptation, He will also make the way out in order for you to be able to endure it." Now, at times, a person's depression can become so severe that it may require professional help. And if that's the case, then so be it. It's just a word of caution here, friends. Please exhaust all the provisions that Jehovah God has given to us in these last days to handle our problems first. And that's because that's where we get divine wisdom on the matter, true wisdom. See, any other source, it has a possibility of grave danger because it's human. So that makes it worldly wisdom and philosophy. So it's imperfect, and if we do not screen it and monitor it properly in line with scriptural principles, it can cause us even bigger problems than the depression that we're facing. And unfortunately, we've seen some friends fall prey to that. Being one of Jehovah's people in these last days and living up to our dedication is not easy, and it's sure to get tougher as this system nears its end. But one scripture of hope that we can conclude with is in the book of 2 Chronicles. If you please turn to 2 Chronicles 15, verse 7. 2 Chronicles 15, verse 7. It says, "And you be courageous, and don't let your hands drop down, because there exists a reward for your activity." Our activity of being one of Jehovah's Witnesses will be blessed with the reward of everlasting life in God's new system of things, a world where depression will not be a part of our life. Thank you.